Thought Bubble Audio.
Look, up in the sky!
You will never find the more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Welcome to Beer with Geeks with Tim and Frank.
Who are you?
I'm Batman.
I am Iron Man.
Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Hi, Christopher. I'm Nero.
My name is Inigo Montoya.
You're a wizard, Harry.
A couple of guys with a couple of beers and a whole lot of pop culture nostalgia.
Make it so, number one.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles.
Name the dog in the animal.
Life finds a way.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Now sit back and crack open a cold one, because it's time for Beer with Geeks.
It comes in pints?
Shaken, not stirred.
Great Scott!
I was way off. I knew it started with an S, though.
Hi, and welcome to Beer with Geeks, where two geeks geek out with beer. I'm Tim, and with me, as always, is my friend Frank? George? Ringo? Who are you?
You're right. It was a hippopotamus, but it talked. Now, what do you think? Do you think that's sense or nonsense?
I think it's nonsense, Frank. Good.
I find this
Good
really
show.
encouraging, honestly, I do. Hello. How are
Hello.
you?
I'm good, Frank. I am doing well. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. I'm excited to talk about a new Marvel show.
Marvel show. I love a good Marvel show, Frank.
You too.
Sometimes I don't.
We'll
find out.
Let's find out. Well, I hope you love what you're drinking. What are you drinking?
I do love what I'm drinking. I am drinking a Northwoods Brewing Company Landlocks and Brookies Pale Ale.
Nice.
Which is very, very good. I chose it because we deal with two different personalities, maybe three, in the show that we were talking about today. And there's two fish on the front of this can. So I was like, it's connected somehow, probably.
You got your Landlocks and your Brookies. You got your Stevens and your Marks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Cool.
What are you drinking?
Cool. I am drinking a Peak Organic Happy Hour Pilsner.
Oh, nice.
It is
still on your Pilsner kick.
Still on my Pilsner kick. They call it a crushable Pilsner. And I can confirm it is quite crushable. Yeah, it is. It's very light. It's perfect, like summer. It's a very this is like an all summer long kind of beer. And given that we've already had some really hot days here in New England, I could see myself enjoying a bunch of these this summer. So, yeah,
that's good.
Happy Hour by Peak Organic.
I'm going to check those out myself. And I do actually, I should say, I do recommend the Northwoods Pale Ale. It's it's smooth for an ale. It doesn't for pale ale. Sometimes they go a little dry.
Sure. Yeah.
This one doesn't appear to be so. But on a very hot day, I'd probably pick the Pilsner.
Sure.
Over the Pale Ale.
That makes sense. I see that.
Yeah. Well, Frank, there's a new Marvel show that premiered and ended recently, that of Moon Knight.
Yes.
Much demanded, much delivered. Moon Knight. I think also since it came out fairly recently, we should maybe also discuss the She-Hulk trailer and maybe the Miss Marvel trailer.
Sure.
Since those things are brewing up as well, those are next on the docket. So first, let's talk Moon Knight. How familiar were you with Moon Knight?
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
Do you... I mean, you read Ultimate Spider-Man, so there was if you recall, there was an arc that featured Shang-Chi and Moon Knight and I want to say maybe Elektra.
Okay, do you remember Elektra?
Iron Fist and...
Honestly, I read it all.
Doctor Strange.
I read it all so long ago that some stuff sort of blends together in my mind. But okay, so maybe I was somewhat familiar from that, but probably wasn't following very well at the time because I don't really have the background for the character.
Gotcha.
Prior to this show.
Gotcha. Oh, that makes sense. I've been always I want to say just tertiarily aware of Moon Knight. That's not correct. But I never really dived into the books when he showed up. I knew what he was about. I the basic gists, but that's pretty much as far as it went. I always thought the design was cool and and I liked the idea, but the reading material, a lot of it just never really struck a chord with me whenever I would try.
Interesting.
And so some characters are like that. Like I enjoy the Punisher when he shows up as a foil for another reason, but I don't like seek the character out myself. I think that's probably as close a description as I can come to. So, but I was anticipating this Marvel show because I'm a big Oscar Isaac fan. I love Oscar Isaac. He's so talented. He is the kind of actor that I think if they made movies like they did back in the 70s and 80s, we'd see him as like a Pacino or a De Niro or something that like he'd be one of those guys. But because so much of the box office is filled with franchises, like he's almost like not forced into these more superhero affair parts, but like that's kind of what's available. And if you're a working actor, you're probably going to end up choosing one of these bits.
Those are the great opportunities of this age, right? Where like the great roles of like the 70s or the 80s were more of like De Niro, Pacino, those sort of Harrison Ford. Like I kind of see him as, because he can do the action star thing too, but he also has the like the gravitas to. He acted the hell out of this show.
He did, right? This show actually it's a great indicator of like his range.
Yes,
like he has got a great range, and so I was excited to see that range on display. And truthfully, I thought he really delivered. Like the show, without spoiling it, I thought the show was good. Like, but without him, I'd be like, nah, it was okay.
Yeah,
like, It was interesting. It was interesting. I probably will never rewatch it, but I want to see what happens next. And I think a lot of that lands at his feet.
Yeah. He sold a lot of it. Like he sold me on watching it in the first place. And most episodes, the thing that I enjoyed most was his performance, above. In some cases above the plot, in some cases above the effects or whatever, but like he was like the consistent thing of like he was always like the one of the best things about every episode of the show.
It's so funny because I feel like he's kind of cursed to be in these like not as good as the other ones in these franchises, right? He was Apocalypse in X-Men, and like which was not terrific. Like he probably could have been great given a better movie, but here's the part that he was in. And then he's Poe Dameron, which he's great in, like the middling sequels that like that can appear directionless even for their main characters. And then here he is in Moon Knight, in which again he's great, but he's caught in like not a mediocre story, but maybe one that didn't live up to its potential. Like I think there was a lot to play with, and it felt pretty generic except for like that one twist most of the time, and it just it never really reached the heights that I wanted it to. Never went to the moon, Alice. But anyway, so let's say that ends with the non-spoilery talk, so we can talk about other things. So. But continuing with the Moon Knight trend, like I loved Steven. I loved Mark. I knew that he had 3 personalities, so Jake was not a twist for me. Especially since like there are moments even from the first episode where you're like, Mark was like, I didn't do that,
right?
It wasn't Steven. So like you're like, oh, okay, well there's a
third,
obviously there's a third, right, and that they don't know about. So I knew there was a third. So like. It was one of those moments where I'm like, a general audience, good twist, or like good payoff for what was happening earlier. Like, how did you feel about that?
Yeah, I didn't know. So the twist worked on me. It was really good, especially because I was starting to worry towards the end there, that they were going to go the route of this whole thing was a dream. Like when he snaps back to being back in the mental hospital, Mark/Steven, before we see that what's his name, the Ethan Hawke,
Ethan Hawke,
Harrow, before we see Harrow's bloody footsteps, I was like, oh no, are we gonna find out this whole thing really, like, that he really is just a mental patient and like the whole thing was just a fantasy? Like that, please don't. Like that's way too, like, that would just, how awful that would be. And I was glad it wasn't. But then to see where it actually netted out, was super, super interesting twist. So yeah, I didn't have the context for it, so it worked on me great. They got me with that. I will say I found the plot a little hard to follow at times, and it was sort of like, what exactly are we, like, I got that it's like, okay, Khonshu and Amit and we need to stop Amit, but it felt like a proxy fight for these like kaiju, like,
sure, yep.
Like the whole series felt like it was sort of a, like, humans being the pawns of these kaiju, so to speak, and it didn't feel like the people were just chess pieces.
Sure, I mean, because they are. So I didn't dislike that actually, but it does. I don't know. Does it remove some of the stakes when you're watching Godzilla versus King Kong battle, and you're like, well, I don't really care about the people, even if they are wearing cool costumes or whatever. But so I get that.
But it's like those movies are typically about Godzilla or about Kong, like,
sure.
Whereas it was weird for me that the main character, who is Mark/Steven, was almost second, like, wasn't where the actual action was happening or where the actual story was happening.
And you're speaking directly about the finale, I would assume, right?
Especially about the finale, but really when you take a step back and look at the whole series, it's like everything that happened was in service of sort of the culmination in the finale. So that was a little hard for me at times. It was sort of like hard to care because it seemed like it was sort of abstracted from what was really going on.
Now, I don't think I can't get behind that directly, because like Moon Knight and whatever else, they're avatars of these Egyptian gods, and like they're basically the hired help or whatever, because the gods can't function in the real world or not, have decided not to, so they use these avatars. And so I get, like, I don't think that does anything to the stakes or whatever else, because you understand what they are. I do think that Amit and Khonshu battling at the end does take away from the I don't know, the tension of the human fight, because like if the gods couldn't or weren't going to do anything on the human plane, and now they are, then why do you in fact have avatars? That's the part that I can get behind. But I did like this. I did like using Egyptian mythology in a fun way. I liked finding Alexander's tomb and, like,
sorry, Mr. the Great.
And that was great. Yeah, Stephen was the best part. I'm sorry about everybody else.
For sure.
Mark's fairly generic as far as action stars go.
Correct.
Stephen's where it's at.
He was so so fun.
Yeah, he was wonderful. So it was all fine. But you're right. In some ways, it was like, now we're going to this guy to learn this thing, and I'm like, why?
Right.
Yeah, there is a bit of that. Like, the puzzle doesn't exist. The amazing race of it all doesn't exactly, like, it all fits together, but just kind of like because it has to.
Yeah. It doesn't really come together in a satisfying way for me.
No.
And I spent most of the 6 episodes sort of wondering if my confusion was by design. Like if it's like, no, you just gotta wait. It'll all your questions will be answered at the end, or if I was missing something. Like, were they? I spent most of the time like sort of, okay, I don't really understand why that just happened, but I guess I'll hang in here and see if it makes sense.
Give me an example of like what you didn't understand happened because it happened.
So very much like the going to. I really started to care when they got to Cairo, like when they went to Cairo in like episode 3 or 4, whenever that was. That's when things started to they started to hit a bit of a stride. But prior to that, it felt sort of aimless and wandering, and I was sort of wondering, like, okay, now we're running around London, now we're running around here, now we're running around, and we're meeting, Layla, and everyone, like, okay, we're sort of building the cast of characters. I get that, but for what? For why? And around by the time they got to Cairo, it started to gel a little bit better, but it just sort of vacillated back and forth between feeling coherent and feeling a little aimless.
I didn't feel that, truthfully. I actually started to not lose interest when it went to Cairo, because I found being in Cairo interesting, and I know that the directors who are Egyptian were very interested in making like authentic Cairo, where they were like, they wanted to show that like Cairo like does exist in the 21st century. Yeah. Like everyone always thinks like, we just have our baskets and our horses and carriages.
No, it's a modern city
and whatever. Yeah. Right. And there was, he was specifically even talking about how like people always make it look like the pyramids of Giza are like really far away and they don't exist or anything. He's like, they are right in the middle of the city. Like they just exist right there. And so, and I did enjoy the push and pull between like the modern and the ancient.
Yes.
And I appreciated like going for authentic Cairo and what it is and how beautiful it can be and stuff like that. But I didn't find that the show ever really I never found that it lost its thread. I thought that I get the meandering, kind of like my comment right now. But yeah, it just it could have moved a little more briskly, I guess.
Yeah, which for a 6-episode series is already short, right? Like that's 6 is pretty short. And I was,
what it was? I think Harrow's goal is really generic.
Yeah.
Where I found he started strong. Like the show starts with Ethan Hawke like breaking the glass and putting on his sandals and walking in the glass. I'm like, what is this guy's deal?
Sure.
Like I'm so interested in what this is about. And by the end, you're just a dude who like ends up like being like every other generic comic book villain.
Yeah.
Like it, which is a shame because I find Ethan Hawke is a very good actor. He's a very naturalistic actor, and he was compelling up until the point in which the show didn't really care about him anymore.
Sure. Yes. I definitely agree. Yeah, that was one of the main things. It was like it wasn't, not that it wasn't clear what his motivations were. That was clear, but I didn't care. Like this show failed to make me care beyond like. It wasn't anything new. It wasn't anything particularly interesting. What his motives were. It was just sort of very like color by numbers. And so that the lacking a strong villain made it hard for the rest of the stakes to sort of be there, or for me to really get invested in like, we got to stop this.
There was also a pretty big rumor that he was Dracula going around at one point, because there was a rumor that Werewolf by Night was supposed to be in the show, and I think that got confused with one of the hounds of the underworld. But so like there was a part of me that was like just kind of waiting for him to become Dracula.
Oh, sure, okay.
Like, but then I was like, I was the avatar of Khonshu first. I was like, you're not Dracula.
Yeah.
That's not happening. And all of a sudden, like, he became less interesting. Not because I like needed him to be Dracula, but like, you're just a dude, who's like was in service to one Egyptian god. Is like, well, I didn't like what that one was about, so I'm going to do it again.
Right. I'm gonna try another one.
Yeah, but I liked, like, there was this, like, cult leader-ish. I know he based it off of somebody real, and I can't remember who it was. But, like, I wanted more of that. Like, he started strong, but then he had nowhere to go. And I think, a good villain rises to the villainy along with the hero, and it's difficult because Moon Knight already exists in Moon Knight, right? And so it's just that Steven's learning about it for the first time,
right?
And so it's really hard for the villain to start at ground zero when the hero also doesn't start at ground zero.
That's right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yep. Speaking of Moon Knight already existing, which of the two costumes did you like better, Steven's or Mark's?
So I love the classical Moon Knight costume. Yep. I think it's very cool. I think white is a bold move in any costume, and I liked what they did with the original. I liked the Egyptian wrappings,
that was cool.
Like the mummy wrappings, and I thought that was creative. But there was something about Steven's suit that I just really loved.
It was so cool.
I know that's also a comic thing from one of the more recent runs. Maybe I want to say when Jeff Lemire was writing it.
Something I read. Yeah, I read somewhere that it was Jeff Lemire.
Yeah. And so I was glad that they incorporated it in their own way. And I like that they each have their own version. So but what is it about Mark that he gets the classical mummy wrappings? And I like that Steven's you said a suit. So,
so you said
I imagined a suit. Which was, so I think I appreciate the classic costume because it's cool, but just it's something that it feels quite different than anything that it really exists. I think I liked Steven's just a little bit more, maybe because I just liked Steven more.
Yeah. I think I'm with you on that. I liked his costume more, but I definitely liked him more as a character, and that I think that may have impacted it.
Yeah, because you don't really get a sense of Mark's character until episode 4, which is the background episode, right? Which I thought was great. I loved the mental hospital stuff with Harrow and going back and learning where Steven comes from. Though they do they don't really tell you why, but he's a backup personality or a multiple part of the multiple personality grouping pretty early. And I want to say there's a Stephen Grant tape in that episode or something like that, and you're like, oh, okay, well, that's where you came from, not just the name, but the personality too. And the episode leads you there, and you're like, but I knew that because you
showed me that
30 minutes ago.
Yes, that was exactly my experience.
But I did find that episode pretty moving. You're superhero show, finding Alexander the Grand's tomb, boom, child abuse. You're like, wow, whoa, okay. I could see why Feige was we didn't pull punches for this one, and watching it, the action, I'm like, okay, well, it's I don't find it any more or less than any of the other action in Marvel. But then that, I was like, oh, this is what you meant when you said you didn't pull punches.
Right.
Oh, you were being funny because everyone thought you were talking about the action,
right? But
you were talking about child abuse,
right? Yeah. Yes, that was a very compelling episode. They dealt with a lot of issues very, very in a very canny way, in a very sensitive way, with the abuse in that episode, with the multiple personality aspect throughout, mental illness throughout. They handle those issues very well.
So here's my only question, which I had pretty early in the film and the movie, the show, and it never seemed to get answered. So Steven's not real. He's not the original personality. Right. So he does not have a social security number. He does not have any of these things. How does Steven have a job?
Excellent question. Excellent question. I do not know. How does he have identification? How does he I do not know.
And then even Steven doesn't know that Mark exists, but Steven is, from what we see at the beginning of the show, the dominant personality, where Mark's almost in hiding, and Steven is the one that exists. So why does Steven sleep with a thing around his ankle and sand around his bed to see if he sneaks out? But he doesn't know he has another personality, so why is he doing that in the first place?
I guess he knows he's losing time, and he knows that he's waking up somewhere else, right? He did have that experience of waking up elsewhere.
Okay, that's true. That's true. Okay, I rescind my comment.
He thinks he's sleepwalking, I guess, right? And so he's trying to tie himself to the bed to prevent that, which is okay. I mean, you can Go ahead, tie yourself. See if it stops an Egyptian god.
Correct. Well, he doesn't know that
Yeah,
bit,
yeah.
And Steven, as smart as he is, not the smartest.
I know. I really enjoyed the aspect of the show that I enjoyed, and I wish they would have spent more time on, was Steven's specialty, like sort of the they could have gone in more of a sort of Indiana Jones direction with like the archaeology aspect of it, with the like that episode where they find Alexander the Great's tomb. Like that was probably my favorite stuff.
I agree.
Favorite sort of B plot that I would have liked to see that blown up more and made that more of a primary driver.
I really wanted it to lean, because Moon Knight typically is more like I would say like the urban Avenger. Like he sits more in the Daredevil Punisher category of heroes. Like, but this, because they were going, the larger Egyptian pantheon thing, I really like it. Had these shades of Indiana Jones and the Mummy, but it never really claimed that for its own. And maybe because it's trying to also like tell the story about multiple personalities and like this cult leader and this other things, but it's butter stretched over too much bread. Like it's, like you're trying to do too much with a very limited amount of time. And so your sole focused has to be one thing or the other thing. And the other one's just to be like the sprinkling of flavor. And it just didn't deliver enough for me to be completely satisfied.
I agree with that. I'm kind of surprised. I kind of thought you were going to be way more into the show than I was. As I was watching it, I was trying to sort of guess what your reaction was going to be, and I thought you were going to be a lot more, because I'll be honest, I was a little put off just because I'm not as much into the like magic, fantasy side of things. I know that about myself. We have talked about this, and you are more into that than I am. So I was like, I wonder if I'm just being biased because I don't go for that kind of story, and maybe Tim will appreciate it more because he does like that. But I'm interested to hear, that we actually kind of are netting out in a similar place. Maybe we're coming at it from different directions, but we're landing in a similar place.
Yeah, maybe, because I mean, the things that I did like about it are some of the things that you mentioned.
Sure,
like
that makes sense.
I liked his relationship with Khonshu, and I thought F. Murray Abraham was great.
He was so great. Yeah,
I love F. Murray Abraham, and I'm like, I can't believe that F. Murray Abraham is doing this.
I immediately
but also,
was like,
he was a Star Trek villain, so there's like a part of me that's like, I know why you're doing this, because you're a big old nerd, like
True,
so
true.
like I get maybe why you've decided to hop onto this, but so I thought that was cool. I very much liked his inclusion.
Yes.
I liked Layla. I saw a tweet that went viral that said like, this Egyptian dad who was like, my daughter is like we're watching Moon Knight together, and this is the first time that she's ever seen a superhero that looks like her.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Like, curly haired Egyptian, like whatever. And I just thought he was like, so thank you for like making that happen for her, because she actually feels like, oh my gosh, that's like me.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I mean, it's just like
representation is an important thing.
It is. And it's just like in I guess it was in the finale when that little girl was like, are you an Egyptian superhero? And she says yes. Like, that's so cool. Like that's so yeah, that's what you saw is literally that happening in real life, and that's awesome.
Yes. So there are things about it, like I said, I really did enjoy. It was a different type of story than I expected.
Yeah.
Like it was a little bit maybe more grander in scope than I expected with the Pantheon, and then it didn't lean, I think, hard enough into its like it wanted to be horror and thriller and action and psychological like drama and like all of these different things, and it just like, I wouldn't say that it didn't blend them well. I just didn't think it did a awesome job at servicing all of them.
Yeah, I think it probably tried to do too much for 6 episodes.
Yeah, but I didn't dislike any of it. I think that's maybe what it is. Like nothing about it turned me off. I was just like, but as far as the like Disney Plus shows at least go, it is my least favorite.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. But
Yeah,
but I'm with you in that it's not that it did anything badly. It's that there was so much potential to do more, and it didn't meet that potential.
Yeah, and in some ways, it felt. There are points in which it felt quite disinterested in action, and then there are other points where I was like, "This is maybe like where's the story?" Because you wanted me to tell a good story, but I think truthfully, I don't think the pilot. I think is the best episode, or at least the first episode.
Sure,
I think there's some really inventive camera work in the way that they flash in and out of Steven and Mark taking people. Like that was like really cool and really well done. It threw me off balance, even though I knew what was happening, but it was still cool, well shot, well executed. And then by the end, it felt generic. And I think that's my biggest complaint. It's just that it was generic.
Yeah, there was a lot that felt generic. I agree with you. The first episode was probably the best. I thought the finale actually was pretty engaging and exciting too. The kaiju thing aside, there was a lot of really good action. There was a lot of really great camera work. Great, like by that point, Steven and Mark are switching back and forth, seamlessly, fluidly, and that was fun and exciting to watch, like in a fight scene, for example. And there was a lot to enjoy in that last episode. That even though, yeah, it's not my favorite story, but it's nothing against the show. Honestly, I don't think so much as it's like I thought about it in terms of like, would I be enjoying this if I was reading this in a comic? Like if I was reading this story in a 6-part comic, and the answer was no. Like, and so it's not the show executing it poorly. It was just like, this is not a story that's for me, and that's okay. Like this one wasn't for me. God, there's 15 years almost of Marvel stories that are for me, and so if one of them every once in a while isn't so much, okay, fine. Put this on the pile with Thor: The Dark World. That's fine. Like that's okay. Their batting average is still really, really good, so that's okay with me.
Yep, and I wouldn't put it with Thor: The Dark World, but I think it is filled with a very talented cast that elevate
super talented,
pretty generic material, not mediocre material, even just generic. Like, and there's nothing wrong with that. It was like maybe the last 2 minutes of the first season of the last episode was like give me more of this intrigue.
Yeah.
Like I didn't expect these things. So to an extent, like I didn't expect Contra to be sitting in the limo. Like, that was surprising to me. Like that's cool. Yep. Give me more of that. So anyway, really briefly, did you watch the Miss Marvel trailer by any chance?
I did.
Yeah. What do you, thoughts on the Miss Marvel trailer?
I think it looks super fun. Like I'm super. It's not something I expected to be excited about when it was announced. Again, a character that I don't have a lot of exposure to, so I didn't really have any don't have a lot of expectations going in. But it looks like it's going to be really good. What do you think?
It looks like it's going to be good fun. I know that it's not. It's skewing for a younger audience. Yep. Like that's what they're hoping to hit the adolescent tween years instead of Moon Knight, which is maybe not for that.
Yeah,
age group,
which I think is smart, and they need to do more of. So I'm glad that they are venturing in that direction, because you need to sort of start building the next generation of fans.
Agreed,
and not just target things at their parents.
Yep, I agree, and so I'm happy for that, and it looks fun. It's cute. I don't have an attachment to her as a character, apart from the things that she's shown up in, and I'm like, oh, she's fun. That's nice. And so besides that, I'm going to kind of just wait and see. What did excite me is I saw that I think one of the producers described it as a mix between, I want to say they said something like an Amblin film, and Scott Pilgrim, and I was like, sold.
Yeah, totally,
sold,
totally. Like, sign me up for that.
Yeah, so I'm excited for that. And as of recording this, the She-Hulk trailer has dropped. It's coming out the show's coming out in August. What did you watch? Did you watch it while I was watching it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That also looks good. It didn't. I feel like I didn't get much from it. Just sort of like the setup of the premise, basically. Which is enough to sort of tee it up. It didn't pull me in. It just sort of, I feel like, okay, now I know what the show is about. But I'm gonna watch it. Like I'm basically in to try any of these shows unless they actively turn me off. I'm probably gonna stick it out. You know.
Yep, same. And I was a big fan of Charles Soule's She-Hulk run. I don't know if you read that at all. It's like 12 issues or so, and I know that seems to be the bulk of the inspiration for the show, which I am a fan of because it's really Jennifer Walters, attorney at law, also She-Hulk, and it's like good workplace comedy dealing with C and D list heroes and villains, and I'm about that. I think, and I'm excited to see Tim Roth again. You know, because we haven't seen him since the Incredible Hulk. Well, actually, that's not true. He was in Shang-Chi. Abomination was very briefly.
True.
But I think that's cool. Cool to see him again because he's a great actor. Tatiana Maslany is an excellent actress, and so you know, Bruce is in it more than I expected him to be, even in the trailer. So we'll see. We'll see. I like the character enough that I'll watch a show. That's fine.
I have a feeling it may be a sleeper. Like it may be better than we are even seeing. I feel like they're holding back.
I hope so.
Yeah.
There have been not a lot of rumors, but I don't usually put tons of stock in rumors because they end up not being true. See Moon Knight rumors of Dracula and Werewolf by Night. But I've heard that from a few different, like, instead of like some rando dude on Reddit, but like this, I know somebody who worked on it kind of thing. They say it's a mess. Like, and so they're like, but messes sometimes turn out okay, especially for companies that are used to kind of like cleaning up the mess.
Yeah.
Where they know what they have to do to solve that issue, and then it might not be the greatest thing you've ever seen, but it won't be trash.
I wonder if that, I mean, are they saying that the show itself is a mess, like it watches like a mess, or that the production was a mess?
I think the show is a mess, not so much the production, but I'm not positive. I think it's fairly CG heavy, obviously, because you have two Hulks plus Abomination, and I think maybe that could be a true. That could be a factor. Maybe the tone can be inconsistent, or I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But
okay. But they were saying the show itself, it seems like it might be a mess. We'll see. Yeah. I guess we'll see in August. But I don't know. Both of those trailers look quite good. Yeah, they're. I mean, I have more familiarity with She-Hulk than I do with Ms. Marvel, but like I said, I think that Ms. Marvel looks super fun, and I think it's very smart for them to target a younger audience. I think honestly they should probably. I wish they would shoot for more PG rated films rather than PG-13. At this stage, it almost feels like a flex of like we can like going for PG-13 just because we can. I don't see why they can't rein it in a little bit. And go more for PG, but that's just my personal hang up. But I think it's smart to at least, if you're not going to do that, create stuff that is specifically for a more of a PG audience. And sort of, like I said, create the next generation of fans. And between that and She-Hulk looks pretty good. Yeah, more Bruce than I would have thought. So it could be more of a hit than I'm expecting. But
yeah.
We'll see. We're going to watch it, and we'll find out.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we will watch it, and we will find out on this show together. Speaking of the show, where can people find this show?
Yeah, if you're into Apple Podcasts and Spotify, you can find us there. You can rate and review us there. You can subscribe there. If you want even more, and if you want to help us continue to support us and continue making this show, go to patreon.com/thoughtbubbleaudio, and you can subscribe for as little as $1 a month to help support us and help us to keep making this show and the other shows at the Thought Bubble Audio Network at thoughtbubbleaudio.com. You can see the other shows there. You can find the show notes for this episode and all of our episodes at beerwithgeeks.com. And you can email us at beerwithgeeks@gmail.com or follow us at Beer with Geeks.
Very nice, Frank. Lovely to talk to you as always. So, until next time,
Cheers.